Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Breaking Uneven podcast. We love to talk shop, uncover the beauty of failures, and play a few games. Today, we have with us Hamish Blythe, the founder of Trilo. While studying geology and petroleum, Hamish also worked at Apple, then John Lewis, then jumped into entrepreneurship with Twigd. After university, he did a short stint growing My Crew in Los Angeles and then finally started Trilo back in London. Please tell me we did a good job covering a snapshot of your journey so far.
Surprisingly good, yeah, surprisingly good. I don't think I've talked that many people about John Lewis and Apple, but yeah.
Now we can jump into a quick little game to understand a little bit more about Trello.
Cool.
So we call this game the Twitter Pitch Challenge, and Twitter is known for its 280 character limit on every tweet, which sometimes makes it a little difficult to convey your thoughts. It takes about 20 seconds to speak to 80 characters, and so your task is to explain Triller to us in 20 seconds, but it's not that easy. You also need to use one emoji and one hashtag in your tweet.
Can I speak really fast? Does that? Then I can extend it. Or does that not
It's
count?
a loophole. It's a loophole. You've got it. So yes, you can speak really fast.
Cool.
So 3, 2, 1, your time starts.
Trilo is a new payments and multi-platform that gives you the ability to drive your sales, to cut costs, get rid of cards, and have no transaction fees, all for 50 quid a month. Hashtag shop local, support locals, money face emoji.
Not bad. Not bad. You're well below 20 seconds. And I think that's probably one of the best Twitter pitches we've had. It was like cut on the dot. Great stuff.
Amazing. And I could hear you were trying to speed up your the way you were saying it. But
I'm never quite sure how 20 seconds actually is. It's kind of if you're riding a bike, it's like, okay, it's that. If you're sitting in front of a screen, it's a bit longer and shorter. So yeah, you always have to go for it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But yeah, before we dive into Trello, Anuj and I both are from Mumbai, and we saw that you volunteered in Mumbai. So how was your experience, and how did you like Mumbai?
It was incredible. I was out in, as part half the time I was in Mumbai itself, and half the time I was out in Maharashtra, the kind of area around it, out just to the east of it. It was quite something, and really seeing the difference. Well, both the intense difference with kind of the UK and Europe, but also a lot of similarities, and it was really quite eye-opening to see all of that. I was working with a charity who had a big outdoors activity centre out in the countryside, and then in the city we were working with kind of children playing sports and really bringing that up. And it was quite amazing seeing all the children getting so enthusiastic about just the competition side and playing. What I quite like, they were playing against each other. They had competition. They wanted to win. It wasn't like in the UK where you have a participation trophy. It's like, no, I want to actually win this. I don't want a silly participation trophy, which was brilliant to see. So yeah,
amazing. But given that you're from the UK, what inspired you to go outside of the UK and also India specifically to have that experience?
I think the UK has obviously the UK for so long has been a powerhouse in a lot of different areas. They've been able to really grow and everything, but actually for the last 20, 30 years, it's kind of, in a way, it's slowed down a bit. And you've seen a lot of places out in Asia, out in India, that part of the world, and down in Africa, have just accelerated so much because they didn't have the infrastructure that we've had. And so kind of going out there and seeing that, but also I was 18 and I was thinking, well, actually, where haven't I been? Where is somewhere awesome that I've always wanted to go? And that was India. So it both had me not really understanding what I wanted to do going forward, but thinking, okay, well, if I see more places, I'll learn more and I might stumble across something. But also it was quite honestly just an awesome place to go. It was an incredible place to be, and the people were amazing. And it was also very satisfying having thousands and thousands of rupees in my hand. £5, but it was still thousands and thousands. That was quite satisfying.
But your experience in general, right? Not just this, is a very community-led experience, right? So you've got the sports clubs, you've been part of at universities and stuff like that. How do you think these experiences have contributed to you being a better founder?
I think for me, I'm not a city person. I am currently in London, but I am not a city person. I'm countryside. I am kind of small town. I've always loved having people to chat with. Kind of going in if it's a local cafe. I mean, the reason that we started building Trilo was I had this little cafe in my neighbouring town called Bloomers, and I'd go there every weekend with mum, and I'd have a tuna sequence sandwich cut into triangles, was white bread. It's really nice chewy crust, and that was like my thing. I have a bit too many memories of that. And I'd go there every single weekend. Come back from school, I'd go there. Come back from uni. I went actually there about 2 days after I came back from India. I went there, and that was my place. And I've always loved having partly there that kind of local business side is knowing everyone in the town, knowing those people, having a chat with them, that you can walk in somewhere and the person knows you. But then also on the school side, on the sports side, having that community there, that if you've had a tough day, you can go there and you can just detach, you can play sports, you can go swimming, you can do something and your mind just escapes. And I think having that sense of belonging in a way, that sense there has always driven me to build something that isn't just a financial tick in the box. It is actually something that we can help nurture and drive and build that community, whether that is a community in London, in Fulham, whether that's a community out in Oxfordshire, whether that's a community that communities aren't determined by their size. It can be a vast community, but it's where people connect and people belong and there's something linking each other. And I think that really is one of the reasons that I've always been so community driven, whether that is at university, setting up some clubs, whether that is with Twigd, my first business, or even with Trilo now. It's always focusing on that kind of bridging people together.
So I'm assuming that it's that mindset with which Trilo Clubs as a vertical came about, and
Yeah, it's been quite interesting. So we've now moved on from those clubs. We've still got a lot of sports clubs using Trello, but we've also now gone heavily into that kind of high street SMB, working directly with the businesses. But actually, the club side there, we saw there was such a strong potential for us as a business to get our foot in the door and establish our beachhead of consumers to bring to businesses. But also there you have people who spend so much time together. They are so aligned in how they think. They're so aligned in a lot of their lives that once you kind of get in there, you can support them and grow. But you can also, as a business, you can spread faster. I mean, that's where, like we saw when we launched into that university, into that club side back in September, October time, we grew from about 500 people to 10,000 within that first term in just one city, and then we got up to 15,000 before we stopped that and then moved on to businesses so that we can actually make revenue. Because obviously that more club focus side, it is a very strong strategy in play to grow your user base in the event that you can then raise funds and grow, but actually there's not immediate revenue there. Whereas going to businesses, we're solving a core crucial need for them there, and we can still build those communities. Because I mean, our pitch now is going into a high street shop saying, look, we're building and working with communities of independent businesses in Fulham, in Hackney, in Marylebone. We want to help you guys band together against the likes of Tesco's and Starbucks and go from there.
Yeah, I love how y'all focus on like local businesses and local communities. I think that was also given a lot of importance during and after COVID, like support local and things like that became really big. So yeah, what was your reasoning to focus on smaller businesses and local businesses versus the likes of Tesco and Starbucks?
I think, put it short, they have a soul. You go in and you can actually have a chat with them. You can go in and don't get me wrong, the people who work in Tesco's and Waitrose and those places are lovely. Like they are
Yeah.
90% of the time they're decent. You do get a portion who aren't the most pleasant people in the world, like you do in just society in general. And don't edit that out. I'm fine with that going out. But I think the beauty of going into your local cafe or your local bookshop or your local, I mean, we were just setting up a candle shop just around the corner from me, is you go in there and I can have a chat with Amanda, and Amanda remembers me. She knows what I've bought before. Her team remember me. There is that kind of sense of connection there. Whereas you go into a Tesco's or a Waitrose and there's one of two things. Either they just don't remember me because they see so many people and it's just a transaction for them. Or the other interesting side is, sure, the people don't remember you, but Tesco's knows everything about you. They know absolutely everything. So there's nothing more that we can really help them with. And actually, that's where the real kind of inconsistency and almost incorrectnesses in how that place works, in that those independent businesses, they have that soul, they have that connection with people, but they're so underserved. They don't have the tools that Tesco's, that Amazon, that all that Starbucks have. Like Starbucks, they'll know your favorite coffee. They'll know whether you like an extra shot or an extra bit of syrup or something. But your local cafe, they'll know you by name. They'll know that your order is an oat flat white, which is the safest thing to say in London because everyone has oat flat white. But then they also don't really know, unless you're a real regular with them. They might know your face, but they won't really remember you, or they'll get a new member of staff, and they want to build that connection, but they just don't have the tools.
Yeah.
That's where for us, we can go to those independents, give them those tools, and work with them to build that from the ground up.
The reasoning is really strong, and it's like, I think it's important, and I think it's very authentic through your entire journey, because like so far most of the questions we've connected it back to like some sort of community and some sort of like learnings from each other, or like just connecting people together and knowing more about that personal connection. But we've also seen that the people at Trilo work really hard but play also really hard, and there's evidence. We've seen like pictures of you all like having team events and things like that. So we want to show you a picture, and we want you to tell us the story behind this photo.
Oh, Christ alive. Yeah, so that was us down in Algarve. This was an interesting one. We went down there in, when was that? June last year. Now, interestingly, kind of story behind that, we set this up in January last year. Then obviously the funding market went pitong, and we were like, okay, we need to figure out how to sustain this business, how to actually get this working in a way that doesn't require that external funding. So actually going down there, we were able to have a good solid week with everyone, kind of spitballing, getting ideas and coming up with things. And I think the only one there for someone working is Jay trying to figure out how to. I'm trying to remember what he was doing there. I think he was just trying to solve a bug on one of the pages where people wouldn't go to their banking app, and it took us about 2 days to figure out to make it that you just need to open a new tab, which was an interesting one to do. But that was actually really good, and we find kind of having those times when you're together, it really just helps bind and bring people close together.
So working together, at an offset is of course a whole like world in itself. But tell us, more about, do y'all have an office? Do y'all work in person? Is it a remote team?
So now,
How do you find that balance?
So what we've done, we've slimmed the team down slightly now. We did have an office down in Vauxhall, and that was actually really good because you had people coming in, you had that time to kind of whiteboard to just kind of connect and engage. We've actually found that since we've slimmed down the team, having that remote side, but having once a month having people come together, that works really well. Now, I think as we start growing the team, as we're about to hit break even, so I know we're on breaking uneven, but as we're about to hit break even, that will mean that we will then kind of be building the team with more the operational team together and around, because of ops and sales and customer support, all that stuff, you need to have that better connection. But then engineers and the wider side, if they want to, it's giving them that freedom to work where they know they work best. So what we've always done with Trilo is having that kind of that flexibility there, saying that okay, we are adults. We know where we work best. We know where we're most productive. But having a hub to go into, and having a place where we had, I mean, at the office, I'm gonna miss it slightly. We did have a massive big green wall. We had plants everywhere. It was a great place to be. And we'll very much get that back, and we'll very much have a big green wall. But right now, when you're smaller, there's no essential need to have that space, and it's also expensive. It's one of those ones where actually, until you've hit break even, until you can earn it, and until you can do it yourself, don't burn through money that you don't need to spend, and just get really be a tight ass, be a tight bastard, and don't just spend willy nilly.
But as a founder, it's your responsibility is to do what's best for the team, which
Yeah.
might not always match your personal preferences. So, what is your working style? Let's say if you were in a job, would you prefer going in? Would you prefer working from home, or a
So I think
mix?
I'm currently at home, hence why there is a upside down mat in the corner. I'm in a London flat, so our second bedroom is also our office, but the second bedroom is about a 1.5 bed. I like sometimes I like working from home. I've got to dash over to the other side of London after this, and I think for me, going out of the house, that's where I work best. I don't really like. I'm not productive at home. I am much more productive in an office or in a cafe or somewhere out, so that I can speak to people, so that I can sell to people, so that I can just kind of have stuff happening there in the background. And I think but that's also where we've seen some kind of engineers, some people, they much prefer being in their place where that is their jam, that is where they are. And actually, when you bring them into an office or somewhere, that they lose a lot of their productivity. Now, there might be a lot of kind of brainstorming that goes on, and so having that once every kind of week or once every few weeks or so is brilliant. But actually, for someone just to kind of crack on, depending on the skill set, it really depends on kind of their situation.
Yeah, like personally, so I started my career during COVID, so it was permanent work from home at that point, and I hated it, like, because it was really difficult to just start off in work from home. But then after that, I got so used to it that now it's like the complete opposite. That now I enjoy the work from home style way more than I enjoy. Like, I like going into the office to meet people and being social, but a lot of times that can also be a distraction. And I think like work from home helps me with like other things. So I mean, yeah, I agree with you. There's like a balance in that sense, but like stepping out and just, I think like stepping out in the summer is like important. During the winter it kind of gets a little
Yeah.
uh
And
depressing.
I think it is very much like the other day. I think yesterday morning it was absolutely tipping it down outside. So I was just like, no, actually, I'm just gonna set up in the room. I'm not going out there. But then by the afternoon it cleared up, and I got straight on my bike and went into London. And it's just so nice, kind of having that ability to switch. And I think that's where, when you have businesses who mandate office work, that just doesn't make sense. Sure, having it kind of okay, try kind of our aim is to have people coming in twice a week, having set days in the office. That can work quite well, but
Yeah.
still having that level of flexibility in there, I think is actually what's best.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, like having that sense of flexibility and providing that flexibility to your employees is pretty key. I think a lot of people also make decisions on where they're going to work based on that sense of flexibility provided to them. But Trilo also has like has investors and board advisors on your team. So what's your dynamic and what's your team's dynamic with your investors and board advisors?
So I think the one of the things that I've very much kind of learned over this time is, if you have a bad situation, if you're struggling, if as a founder you're struggling with team dynamics or sales issues or product issues or anything, don't think, oh no, my investors don't want to hear this. My investors only want to hear the good things. When I started, I only wanted to tell my investors the good things, and that was just wrong. That was like, don't do that. These investors, people invest in you because they believe in you. They believe in your mission, in your drive, in your want to change something. They also invest in you because they've done it before, and everyone has had bad times. Everyone has made mistakes, and most of the time, everyone's made the mistakes that you're experiencing right now. I know for a fact that some of the mistakes that I had, my investors have never experienced, because that was me being really, really bad. Not bad, but really naive. But frankly, then actually, eventually, I picked up the phone, had a chat with a couple of them, and they just said, like, "Hey, look, let's get a coffee, let's talk through this, and let's hash this out." And then that's where actually I realized, having those advisors, and this may sound again naive and dumb for people who actually know about it, but having someone there to sound off who isn't there in the day-to-day, that's why you have an advisor. That's why you have eventually a board member. Because you can say, okay, look, we've got this team issue, we've got this sales issue, we've got this customer issue. I just have no idea what's happening. I've been bashing my head against the wall for the last 2 weeks and I can't fix this. They'll just come in and they'll say, okay, well, what about this, this, and this? And because it's a completely outside perspective, it will be something you have never even considered. Or they might quite simply say, and as ruthless as it sounds, they might say, well, that team member, sorry, bye. And that will just help you kind of click your brain out of gear and you go, wait, that's possible. Okay, brilliant. And
Yeah, I think an outside opinion sometimes is more helpful than like an opinion within your team as well. But one thing I really liked in the way you framed the initial part was like you never said that the investors believed in the idea. You said the investors believe in your mission and what your like drive and this thing. So like the idea or like the solution, so to say, can change and develop, but your core what they believe in is like you as a person and you as a founder and the drive of the team and everything. So I think that was like really key. I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but like I really like the way you said that.
it is for me. It's and it's something that I realized. Kind of, you have. I started Trilo as a 25-year-old, no experience in payments, but I had blind ambition, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to take on Visa and MasterCard. I'm going to just change the way we fundamentally shop. And I know so many other founders who went into a new industry and had that blind naive ambition. Now, when I started this, there were other people who came into the industry, who moved into this having been in the industry for 20, 30 years. Now, what's really interesting is that a few investors you speak with, they have looked at both, and actually by investing in an industry or a product, you could drastically miss out on the person, because at the end of the day, a startup is the founder. A startup is the team.
Yeah.
It is how relentless they are, how much they want to prove themselves, and how much they want to actually make that work and solve the problem that they truly believe in. And that's what people invest in. Because if you want to invest in a product, you would just invest into Visa or MasterCard. You would just invest into the public markets because they have the capital to do it. But do they have the drive to do it? No.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point because I think as startup founders and as a startup team, you're trying to prove something to like the world essentially, and like trying to like prove yourselves as well. So that's interesting. But when there is like a conflict between you and your team with the investors, how do you deal with that?
I think this is one of the areas that I've learned a lot of over the last while. Now, I think with investors, if there's a conflict, you just need to get them. You need to have a coffee. You need to have a conversation and say, okay, so you think it should be this. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me every reason that you think it should be this? And then I can also tell you why I think it should be that. And then you never make a decision in that call. That might be a conversation. There might be the worst case shouting matches. But I've experienced shouting matches with your investor. And if anyone ever watches this and they have a shouting match, just step away, cool off, refresh, and go back to them. And I think that's the main thing. If it's an investor, listen, learn, sit back, speak to a few other founders, and find out. If there's an issue with the team, that's where one of the things that I've very much learned is that when you're building a company, if you're the founder, if you're the CEO, if you're a co-founder, and there is an issue, you always want to listen to people. Don't get me wrong. Everyone should have input, hands down. But at the end of the day, it is your business. At the end of the day, it's your mission that you're going on. And if someone's saying, no, we don't do this, we do this. If they're saying it and there's genuine valid reasons, speak to a few other founders, get perspective. And sure, a lot of the time you probably will be wrong. But actually, if you truly believe that you need to go to A, but they're saying go to B, then say, look, actually, we're going to go to A. And brilliant. If you want to come with us, great. Otherwise, let's find something else for you to do. Because at the end of the day, it's you want to make sure that your team is well structured, is together, is working together. Because of what the second that you have one rotten apple in there, it can spoil the whole pot. And so you do. There is a point where you do need to be ruthless. But it's about making sure that everyone is heard, listened to, that everyone has that input, so that if that event happens, you've listened, you've heard everyone out, and you're doing it in the right route.
Interestingly enough, so I work with my sister, and that is kind of the dynamic between us as well. Like when we are at odds about any kind of decision,
Yeah.
we kind of hear each other out, take the pros and cons. The team kind of votes on which side they prefer. We've always maintained that none of these decisions and votes or anything have anything to do with ego or personal character. It's just what's best for the company. And then each of us have certain areas like marketing, finance, accounting, etc., where we have final call. And the point is, if I'm to take a final call on an area that's my responsibility and it's not your, I choose my decision over yours, just don't be butthurt about it. That's the overall dynamic. But it's just interesting to see that it's kind of similar to what you might have with investors as well.
It's funny. Like when I was going through, for me up until about April, May, I had kind of the 9 months. I call it the 9 months of hell, the 9 months of pain from kind of all over. And it really was. So sometimes I was speaking with investors and other founders, and they just said, "Look, okay, if that's what you're doing, just exit or do this or do that." And I was always thinking, no, I don't need to do that. It's not that bad. But actually, had I just done that when I was speaking to them, some of these people were saying to do this back almost this time last year. And had I done it back then, that might have been a bit too early, but had I done it back then, it would have solved and changed so much. But again, that is one of the things that you realize is c'est la vie. You learn, you live and learn, and hey, live and learn, move on. As painful as that is, it is, you have to learn some of these things to actually realize quite what to do and quite how to do things.
No, 100%. I think of it as when I make a grave mistake at work and then I wait to finally feel the consequence of it. And when I do, I feel like I've unlocked a new level in my entrepreneurship journey, right? It's like a new kind of like a talent or something that you've unlocked and you're like, okay, now I have this experience. This won't happen again kind of vibe. But as a probably someone who's in your late 20s, I'm assuming. How do you keep up with at the end of the day, Trilo is a payment facilitator, which comes with a bunch of government regulations and banking regulations. How do you keep up with that? There's a lot of legal things and financial knowledge required.
Yeah, I think for me, when I first started Trilo, I started looking at the space. I mean, all the way back in 2018. Then 2019, I got back from the US, and my resting heart rate was about double what it is now. My hands were constant like that from the amount of coffees I was having. I had 6-9 months of constant coffees and learning from people like, I don't know, Dave Birch, David Parker, Jonathan Williams, people who have been in the space for 30, 40 years, who were the most knowledgeable people out there. You build relationships with them so that you can learn everything there is about that space. Then the other side, a lot of the regulation, a lot of it's very common sense. It's kind of, okay, well, actually, if I'm going to build a business that I would want to use as myself, as a consumer, then actually what the regulation is saying, surprisingly, that's what you want. I'm not going to go on to Facebook and share with Facebook my bank details or my card details. I'm going to, if it's built securely, obviously Facebook. Sorry, Facebook, if you're watching this. If you're watching this, Facebook, then brilliant. But still, it's kind of, you build a business the way you want. And surprisingly, a lot of that time, it is actually in accordance with the regulation. But in the event that it isn't, it is obviously having that network there, having those people around you to ensure that you are up to date, up to standards. The benefit for us is because we use what's known as open banking in the UK, which is a different set of regulation to cards and all of that. We work very closely with the banks, with the government, and it's considerably more secure. It's considerably harder for malicious activity to occur, and it is again. And then you have that point of, okay, well, build a business that you would want to use yourself. Build a business that is secure and that is robust, and that you can't have malicious agents on because actually, by building something in today's world with today's technology, you're not sitting on top of architecture from the 50s. That, I mean, the kind of mad thing is, I haven't actually got a card, but I don't know. So cards, they were built in the 50s, which is before we even went to the moon. And every day I use these, which are more powerful than the computer that took us there. And like, to put it in context, other than a lovely old sports car, which frankly doesn't work half the time, or a building, which frankly is freezing cold in winter, or I don't really know what else. What do you use that is 7 years old every day? Nothing. And that's because a lot of the stuff that you use every day is built fresh, is built in the last 2-3 years, and it works and it functions. And because it's built in the last 2-3 years, it's got good practice involved. It's got good security measures involved if it's financial or needs it. And that's where for us, the regulation that helps us build something better. But it also means because we're using much more modern technology, inherently within, there are far more safeguards.
Yeah, I think it also kind of applies to the like law in general. So when I first moved back to India, I was quite concerned about when you run a business, you need to have like a lot of corporate governance knowledge, corporate affairs, and all of those. There's a bunch of legal things that you need to be well versed on. But as you get into it, and you will make a few mistakes which are key, as long as there's no large penalties attached to it. You might pay a few penalties, late filings here and there, but slowly, you start to understand the way the law thinks. At which point you realize that okay, there is a common sense to it. It's not your average common sense, but there is a nuanced common sense to it. And if you grasp that, then you can pretty much tell whether something that you're doing, you can assume whether it's going to be okay by law or not. And I think that's
I think the other thing to be aware of is that the UK is a lot of things that they've changed recently are not business friendly. They are like especially startup friendly. But inherently, the UK, same as Holland, for the last 300-400 years, this country has been one of the most, if not the most pro-business out there. Obviously, kind of post-war for a while, that wasn't at all. But actually, there's a lot of inbuilt culturally and everything that is very pro-business, and it's very simple to set up. I mean, to put it in perspective, in the UK, you can set up a business and get all your DD done in about 5 minutes on Companies House. I don't think that's possible anywhere else in the world. I think it is the easiest way to set it up in the world. I may be wrong, but I think the UK has the easiest way to set up a business, and that's because they just know that actually. I can go back to what I was saying earlier. Independent local businesses ran by people, small businesses, they are what make a company grow and thrive, a country grow and thrive. Obviously, the regulation that FCA, their side, was very good. They're getting a lot more stringent in areas that is just it's heavily anti-competitive nowadays. In the last couple of years, when open banking first started, FCA was very pro-competition. But the last couple of years, they've been making it very, very hard for anyone new to enter our space, which is kind of good for us. But I also look at it and I'm just like, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't be limiting someone's access just because they're a new founder or a new startup. Same on the government side with kind of R&D credits and other startup funding. They're saying that they're really supporting small businesses. They're saying that they're increasing R&D credits, and they are increasing R&D credits. But actually, they're increasing R&D credits for large businesses and above, businesses that are making hundreds of millions in revenue. But for small businesses, they've halved them. And that's kind of where you look at it and like, okay, before it was brilliant, but in the last couple of years, a screw's gone loose and they think they're doing it right, but actually it's not. And suddenly this has become political. It's not meant to be political, but it's just kind of a good old statement of facts. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I think like in the legal stuff it gets a little tricky of like figuring out what's the path and how to do it. But I think the way you described it makes sense in the sense that there's a method to like all the madness as well. So like besides like the last part of like the FCA thing, but like the previous things it makes there is some sort of method. But before we go on to like the next segment, and I had like one question on your previous startup, not Trilo, but Twigd. On like LinkedIn, you described it to be building a mobile network that actually works, and I want to know what didn't work for you to like move on from that?
So I think the I haven't LinkedIn's taken off my logo from Twigd. That's unfair. God, it's been a long time since then. So mobile networks in the UK, there's a real issue with telecoms in the UK. It is unlike banking and payments and that side where it's regulated by the government and anyone can really, well, as kind of I said before, anyone could really access it. Now it's a lot harder. Mobile networks, because it's heavily infrastructure led, because you have to have the mobile mast, because you have to have that, is dominated by four players: EE, Vodafone, Three, and O2. Those are the only networks that exist. Then you have what you call an MVNO, so a mobile virtual network operator, and they sit on top of these platforms. So they're kind of buying wholesale from. We bought wholesale from EE, then resold it, repackaged it, and everything into a sales offering that worked. Kind of like how you could take, speaking very blandly, AWS and then turn it into something else rather than just a service stack. Now, mobile networks, telco, back then, it was crazily expensive. It was really hard to set up your account. It was just not consumer friendly in any shape or form. Since then, it's changed drastically. All of those operators, they've all launched their own sub-brands. You've had a few new entrants into the space. It's still dominated by those four and by each individual sub-brand. But it has changed a lot better. And you've got a few other entrants who have come in. And I think back then, mobile networks didn't work. They were overpriced. They were expensive. You had to spend a small fortune on just to get 5 gigabytes, which was insane. But then over the last few years, it has actually worked. And that was really interesting for me because I was going in and having conversations with some of the largest companies in the UK. I mean, these telcos have tens, hundreds of thousands of employees. I mean, Vodafone, actually, the majority of their workforce is actually out in India. But they have very, very big teams. And that was just me going in as a 22, 23-year-old going and saying, okay, I want to build a new payment mobile network. And it actually came about. I was watching, as bad as it sounds, I was watching Kingsmen, which is a film with Colin Firth and Aaron Egerton. And there's this mobile network SIM card which makes people's heads blow up. But it was free. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what we can do with that. Maybe not do the head blowing up thing. I then just, as my brain is, I was then walking along the street. I popped into the shop. I asked the manager of the shop, "Oh, do you know how I can set up a mobile network, a wholesale one?" And it so happens that this guy knew the head of wholesale at EE. A random shop manager in Aberdeen knew the head of wholesale. Had a conversation with the head of wholesale, who introduced me to the right people, and it was very circumstantial. And that, again, I think is one of the things when you're starting out. Just try something. Just ask if it seems like it's a waste of time. If it seems like you'll get a no, if it seems like it's stupid, then do it because it means no one else is doing it. And I think if you're comfortable doing something, then someone else has done it. If you're uncomfortable, then brilliant. And I think that for me, that time that I walked in and had a chat with a random manager with no idea what on earth I was doing, that's one of the most fortuitous things I think I've done. Because that is probably what led me on to doing all of this, I'd say.
No, that's pretty cool. I like the, I wouldn't say checklist, but like, the thought process that, okay, yeah, if you're feeling uncomfortable, like do it. If you're, it makes sense. Like no one else is doing it. So like put your foot in the door and try and change that.
So to understand more about your journey with Trilo, we're going to play this game called Two Lies, One Truth. So you can choose whether it's challenges or achievements or a mix of both. You need to give us 3 statements, out of which one of them is the true big moment at Trilo or in your personal journey, whereas the other 2 are false statements. And then we will have to guess which is the truth.
So one of my achievements is that I always see I can always see the kind of the negative, the downside in something. So I'm always aware of, or usually aware of the other side of a product. So I see the optimistic side, but I always kind of see the other side. I think one of the challenges that I had was getting our first kind of VC. So we raised $1 million from angels in 21. we actually had a VC there as well, and that was quite a challenge, kind of getting them to that point and getting them there. We ended up going with angels because having angels there, as I said, having learned, it is so much better. The other achievement which I have is kind of disconnected to business, but it's actually having that kind of that non-business network there, that non-business friend group, having people there who you can kind of rely on and speak to. And I've realised actually by saying that one, that's probably teetotal the other ones, because that one kind of screwed up the rest of them. But I'll be able to quite easily guess which one's true, which one's false. But yeah,
I think the third one's true.
Third one's true, yeah.
that was unfortunately the true one. Yeah, that didn't really work. I had it going well, and then it just teetotaled. Oh well. No,
I think it's.
I'm guessing this challenge for me has been the best one that you've ever recorded ever, just to kind of get.
Yes, 100%. We've definitely not done it this way before. Well, it is the best one considering that easiest for us to guess. From that perspective, it is the best one.
No, but I think one of my flaws, which I've started kind of figuring out in the last 6 months, is I am an eternal optimist. I do always see the good thing, like the whole green flag thing. I'll always see something good, and I'll always work out how to use that to our advantage. But sometimes the negatives, I'll just kind of breeze over and go, because frankly, any negative is solvable. Any wrong, you'll figure out. If you can't figure it out, then the universe has ended. Like everything that doesn't make sense will make sense one day. And so actually see the right, then you can figure out the wrong. And I think one of my issues is always I breeze over the wrong. I breeze over that hard bit, and that for me is something that I've been learning on. So yeah,
I think you shouldn't learn that. Like, I think it's a good trait to have, because like
it's a very good trait to have, but it is also very good to be aware of and admit to yourself when there are challenges, so that you can then tackle them correctly. Which for a long time I didn't fully kind of appreciate the challenges that were there. I'd be like, oh, that's fine, we'll figure it out. But now I'm like, okay, we'll figure that out, and this is how we'll figure it out. So
so I'm kind of similar. Even I'm quite an optimist by nature. So when I have an idea, I'm like, okay, let's go out and do this. Without giving all the problems and the potential negatives too much of a thought. But what I've done is, like, my entire team knows that whatever I come up with, they have to be the devil's advocate for it.
Yeah.
And so they're just gonna give me reasons to shoot down my idea, and then as long as after the discussion the idea still stands, then we're like, okay, we can go through with it. That's the way I've tried to work around it.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good way of doing it. That's something that we tried doing that with the team, but then, like I kind of said before, then if I'm saying no, this is still where we're going, it didn't do that, and we were dragged in that way. So it took a while for me to say, okay, no, actually that is where we're going. But yeah, I think what you've got is actually the right way to handle it.
Yeah, I feel like I need to reach that sense of balance, because I'm on the opposite side. I feel like any idea I think of, I'll think of all the reason it won't work, and I'll be like, actually, no, this is not happening. So I need to find the other side balance.
No, if you always see the negatives, just sit down, write them on a piece of paper, then scrunch that piece of paper up and chuck it in a filing cabinet somewhere. It's kind of just get the negative, because if you have negatives in your head and you don't acknowledge them, then they'll always keep wearing them. But if you actually write them down, you'll see them on a bit of paper, and then you can move on from it, and then you can start figuring out what the positives are.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's great advice. So our next challenge is called red flags. We're going to give you 3 hypothetical situations composed of 2 things that are going great and 1 that's not so great, which is the red flag. We've adapted these situations for you, and you have to pick which of these 3 you would rather be in and tell us why. So situation 1, Trilo is reaching close to 10 million monthly active users. All the banks are making their Trilo integration super UI friendly, but your clients start to drop off and you can't figure out why. Situation 2, there are more than 10,000 clubs set up through Trilo. You've just raised a very good round of funding, But Trilo becomes so popular and expensive that it can't support local stores anymore. Situation 3, Trilo has almost 1,000 active ambassadors. Even at massive volumes, the app is functioning seamlessly, but you haven't taken a day of leave in almost a year.
I think situation 1, because I can disprove the second fact, because majority of the banks are useless, and that wouldn't even happen. They won't be making their UI simple. But I think once you have 10 million monthly active users, if you have 10 million consumers using Trilo, using a payments and shopping platform, then you can, if clients are dropping off, and clients here businesses, if clients are dropping off, then you can just sit down with them. You can find a group of 10 of them and say, okay, look, what is it that you don't like? What is it that's wrong? Let's rebuild this. Let's restart. And if it is that there is a crucial issue, you've already got 10,000 monthly active users. And if there's 10 million monthly active, that means you've got 10 million people who are okay with it. And probably within that set, there are 10,000 or 100,000 people who actually really like it. And then there'll be a smaller group who love it. So if you've already got that many people, if you've got that bigger penetration, you can sit down with them and really kind of understand what is perfect, what is awful, why those people are leaving. And you can then even rebuild the business, you can rebuild the product, you can figure out how to get it back. I think the other ones, situation 2 just doesn't exist because Trello can't become too expensive for local businesses. So that doesn't even matter. And situation 3, I've not taken a day of leave in the last 4 years. So that one's kind of
my God.
I have done weekends, like weekends, take the weekends off. But yeah, I'd say situation 1 is the most enjoyable challenge and is actually quite an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I liked again the way you said that it's an interesting challenge. I think you're like up for like taking up challenges and taking up like new adventures, I guess, to like see what's coming and growing that way. So that's really cool. And I think that's like a true like entrepreneur, I guess.
Yeah.
When we play this game, otherwise, I think a few people choose to focus on, which is a red flag that I can handle, or that I can deal with. But what was different here is, you took that one green flag, the 10 million monthly active users, and you're just like, if that's happening, then I can figure the rest of it out. That's like, it was just a very different perspective. I don't think we've seen in this game before, which is quite cool to see. Let's go on to our last challenge, which is rapid fire. Pretty self-explanatory. 1 word, 3 word answers, quick answers.
Okay.
So let's start. You did a short video on open banking on LinkedIn, and at the end of the post, you asked people to chip in for a haircut. How much did you raise?
That's 7p. Yeah, there's a reason I've got curtains right now. I'm in severe need of more donations, please. If you can donate, Trilo.me/Hamish, then just send as much as you can. That's what I need.
We're going to add the link to the podcast video for sure for our post as well. What's been your proudest moment with Trilo?
When we turned it around a month and a half ago, and I signed on 7 businesses in 2 hours.
If you had to bring on board a co-founder, who would it be?
There's one chap I know in the UK. I'm not sure whether we'd actually work, but a chap called Blake Jessup. He's very good, product-minded, semi-engineer. I don't think I would work well with co-founders though, but I think he'd be someone. He'd be an interesting one. Yeah.
Interesting. What was your biggest sacrifice to make Trilo possible?
I don't have one. There's a short bit. Longer is, like I said, I'm always optimistic, and I can't. When people say, "Oh, you're taking such a risk," I genuinely have heard that about 5 times in the last 2 weeks. I don't understand what risk I'm taking. I'm learning a lot. I'm doing a lot. I'm building a lot of skills. If this doesn't work, I put it aside. I go get a job at a big company, and I get paid a good salary. I genuinely don't understand the risk of being a founder. I don't. It doesn't make sense to me.
Fair enough. Out of all the clubs,
don't tell other people that. It is high risk work being a founder. High risk work. Yeah.
Out of all the clubs registered on Trilo, which one's your favorite?
So clubs, I would say the fencing club in Exeter. They're just quite cool. I like they were one of our first ones. They have EUFC. The football club couldn't get EUFC because fencing got it first, which I love. Shops. There's a great little cafe just down the road from me, 21 grams, which is really good coffee, and they just test everything that we do, and they are a great kind of early partner.
Oh, wow. Super cool. What was the one time you felt like you let Trilo down?
Not saying no to people and not firing people soon enough. Hands down.
Would you ever retire?
It depends what you class by retirement. I think I can definitely tell there'll be a point where I'll want to take time off and I want to just kind of put it aside. And don't get me wrong, if I could have a month, 2 months, 3 months without working, bloody awesome. But I know in my head I'll always be thinking about stuff. I'll always be wanting to do stuff. So I don't think I'll ever retire and not do anything. I'll move on from business at some point, but I don't think I'll ever stop doing.
Interesting. Would you choose books or podcasts?
I'm dyslexic as hell, so podcast. But I love books, but it takes me about 10 minutes to read a page. So yeah, either audiobooks or podcasts really for me.
Would you choose an iPad or a notebook?
When I was retired, well, no, usually I love writing, but iPads are convenient. I think depends on the use case.
Fair enough. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
It depends on the time of day.
What's your favorite social media app?
None of them. I want to kill them all. I mean, they're vile. They are just unending scroll bait. They are. Social media is the worst thing that happened to humanity, I think.
Fair enough. That concludes the rapid fire segment, almost bringing us to the end of our conversation. But before we let you go, we ask every guest to ask our next guest the question, and obviously neither knows who the other is. So your question from our previous guest is,
How important is your journey personally to you? I mean, is your personal journey very important to you, for your company, for your brand, or not?
My journey, I think, has been a very unique one. I've been very lucky when I was younger. I had a very fortunate upbringing, but then everything that I've done business-wise, I've never had any kind of handouts in there, and I'm adamant not to. I think the brand, both as a founder and as a business, is one of the most important things that you can invest in. I think it helps you grow as a business, helps you attract the right people, attract the right talent. It validates you to people. And I've forgotten the third bar that you asked.
well, the journey to you, your brand, and your company. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's pretty much captures it.
I think they're all very important, and I think the journey is a very unique one that cannot be replicated by anyone else, no matter who it is, whose journey it is. Everyone has their own journey, as hippie as that sounds.
Cool. Awesome. Then that brings us to the end of the conversation. Hamish, thank you so much for giving us your time coming on the podcast. How did you like it? While we're still recording, you can say good things, bad things, whatever you wish.
It was shockingly awful. I hated every single second of it. I couldn't stand it. No, it was really good. I think you very much caught me out with one of the challenges, but it was really, really, really nice, really good. No, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was honestly, there was a lot of like little nuggets that were helpful, like to me as well, and just like a different perspective. So like, yeah, no, thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.